What's up guys and welcome back to the channel. First off, I do want to say that I hope everybody is doing well and keeping safe, especially in this time of crisis. I will continue to post over this period of time, and I just want you all to know that the force is with you and that I'm pulling for all of us. Anyway, my friends, that's very much off topic, so let's go ahead and get into the video. The Rise of Skywalker novelization officially released yesterday, but thanks to StarWars.com, we received a small little excerpt from the novel itself, where it details much of Rey's training under Leia, as well as Leia focusing on the training that she endured under her own brother, Luke Skywalker. In the novel, we learn a few very interesting things about power scaling and the power of Leia as compared to that of Luke. We know as Luke is one of the most powerful Jedi that have ever lived. Especially from the Rise of Kylo Ren comic book, it's very clear that Luke Skywalker is in a league of his own, one comparable to that of even Grandmaster Yoda and his father, Anakin Skywalker. However, of course, when Luke is training Leia, as we see in the flashback in The Rise of Skywalker, he's far younger and still untamed, very much still like his father. The novel details a training session between Leia and Luke, as Leia has now undergone her journey to become a Jedi, expressing to Rey though that she ultimately decided to follow her mother's path and become a politician, and that Luke was not angered by this decision, but that he was very much disappointed by it, and the fact that Leia decided to become a politician on the Senate rather than pursue the path of a Jedi, especially after Luke admits in his own words that Leia is very much special and more powerful than he is, at least naturally that is, which is a distinction I need to make. In this novel, Luke does say that Leia is different and more naturally gifted in the Force than he ever was. This doesn't mean though that by the end of the day that she is more powerful than Luke Skywalker became, which is not at all true. In the end, Luke Skywalker kept on the Jedi path and kept learning more about the Force and the ways of a Jedi Knight. Leia though completely stopped her training, which of course makes sense as to why Luke is far more powerful than Leia in the sequel trilogy. However, it's very clearly laid out that if Leia had continued her path and become a Jedi Master, she would be more powerful than her brother. I do actually have a theory on this as well, as I do not believe that Leia is actually more powerful in the Force than Luke is. I think it's all about the mindset. It basically explains in the Rise of Skywalker novel, as we're about to read, that Leia is more calm and centered because of her royal education, while Luke on the other hand is a farm boy and a war hero. This leads me into the belief that if Leia and Luke were both to turn to the dark side of the Force, I believe that Luke would be the far more powerful Sith Lord. But because the both siblings are in fact Jedi, Leia is more calm and centered, which leads me to believe that she would be the more powerful Jedi and light side wielder. Luke is a lot like his father, while Leia in a lot of ways isn't, more like her mother. So again, Leia would likely be the more powerful Jedi and Luke the more powerful Sith. Now let's go ahead and read directly from the Rise of Skywalker novel. Leia turned and began walking back towards the base. She reached out a hand and let her fingers trail through the fence and broad-leafed creepers that lined her path. Ajen Kloss held so many good memories. Years ago, she'd trained here with Luke, who had declared, "It's nice Dagobah." He'd claimed that it was a wet, warm, green, and overflowing with life, as the planet where he'd trained with Yoda, except it didn't smell bad. Leia stepped into a clearing. To her right was a large tree with a massive trunk, which was reaching for sunlight, spreading a canopy of branches that shaded its clearing, keeping anything else from growing except ground-creeping ferns and low, sparse grass. Leia had trained right here, in this very spot. Leia reached out and touched the tree reverently. A large bulk of bark had formed around an old wound. It was almost sealed shut now. Leia had been the one to damage the tree. She'd swung for Luke and missed with her lightsaber, slashing into the tree trunk instead. This tree had healed itself for more than 2 decades. "Oh Luke, I hope I'm doing this right," she thought. Leia was no Jedi Master, but she had learned from the best, and not just from Luke. Over the years, she'd occasionally heard the voices of Obi-Wan Kenobi through the Force, and even more rarely that of Yoda. Some days, it felt as though she'd learned from the Force itself. She was first and foremost a politician and a general, but she had accepted her Jedi legacy and embraced it as best as she could. And maybe that's exactly what Rey needed. Training in the Force not from a formal master, but rather somebody grounded in everyday life and survival. Obi-Wan had failed to keep Vader from the dark side. Luke had failed the same way with Ben. She could not fail Rey. Many years ago, not long after the Battle of Endor, she discovered the meditative power of sound. She and Luke had stolen away from training, and somehow she'd ended up standing on her hands, while Luke slung good-natured taunts her way. Even with the help of the Force, her shoulders had started to burn, her arms wobbled. They'd already spent the last hour sparring with their lightsabers, and her body was exhausted. "You know," Luke said, his voice smug, "when I did this on Dagobah, Yoda was sitting on my feet." Luke said that a lot back then. When I did this on Dagobah, it was obnoxious and completely unhelpful. So Leia reminded him, "You're being obnoxious and completely unhelpful." "I also did it one-handed," he added. He was trying to provoke her, teach her a lesson about anger and impatience, and all that Jedi nonsense. Luke had forgotten that his student was a superb strategist who'd already benefited from a royal education. Leia would not be provoked. Instead, she considered. She reached out through the Force, let it flow through her like blood in her veins. A tiny insect began rubbing her mandibles together, whistling a sweet, high song. Some instinct guided her, and Leia focused on that sound. It was beautiful, pure, ethereal, completely untethered to the worries of leadership, teaching, failure, and learning. With focus and with delight, Leia raised herself off the ground. She floated upside down, feet pointed towards the sky. After a moment, she lifted her arms and held them parallel to the ground. But Leia was just a student, new to the ways of the Force, and when she came back to herself, fully realized what she'd done, she whipped her hands back down, lest she fall. She did it just in time. Her form collapsed, and she found herself kneeling in mud. No matter, she'd do it better next time. Leia looked up to find Luke staring at her, mouth open. "Did you ever do that with Yoda?" She couldn't resist asking. He shook his head, wordlessly. "I can do better," she insisted. "Float longer." Luke found his voice. "You're going to make me a better teacher," he said. Not the response she'd expected. "What do you mean?" He reached down, helped her up. "Your footwork is terrible," he said. "Don't get me wrong, your lightsaber craft is coming along, but you do other things naturally." His face turned apologetic. "What I mean is, you're exceptional, just different." Then he smiled with the wide farm boy grin that had stayed with him all the way up until the night of Ben's betrayal. Leia shook off the memory with effort. Memories were coming fast and vivid these days. She was glad for this one though. It was the key to the training of Rey. Leia and Rey were different, the last remnants of a dead order, and together they would carve a new path. But there you have it, guys. That is the full excerpt that was released for the Rise of Skywalker novelization, where it does in fact confirm that Leia is different, and again, more naturally gifted in the Force than that of Luke Skywalker. I do find it interesting though that it's made very well clear here that Luke is the better lightsaber duelist, but that Leia is simply more gifted than tapping into the Force, in large part again due to their upbringing, in the fact that Luke was always a more aggressive learner and a student, while Leia is more calm and collected. Leia doesn't get angry or frustrated when Luke does, and Leia here is even learning from the mistakes of Luke that he made with Ben Solo. I find it all extremely compelling. Anyway, my friends, what are your guys' thoughts on this? And what do you think of this little excerpt in the Rise of Skywalker novelization? And how do you feel about in Star Wars canon, Leia being more naturally gifted in the ways of the Force than that of her brother Luke? If we could get this video to 4,000 likes, that would be absolutely phenomenal, and I would appreciate it a great deal. As always, my friends, may the Force be with you, and have a great day.